Gagut greetings. This is John Glover on this date of September 1st, 2019. I'm here to share with you all the God order news that God has ordained a black man, Professor Gabriel Oyibo, with the ultimate intelligence of eta sub infinity. Eta sub n represents the formula for intelligence, and n within that same formula is the level of intelligence. God has designed that n for Professor Oyibo to be infinity, hence eta sub infinity. Since we as black people share the same genes as Professor Oyibo, God has ordained the black race to be the most intelligent, richest, and most invincible race. To understand that last part that I just stated, we call your attention now to the piece you see in front of you, which is the surrender from Göttingen University. Göttingen University is the headquarters of intelligence prior to the Gagut discovery and the Olfapid Institute of Technology. They are based in Germany. They are like I said before, what was considered to be the headquarters of intelligence for Jim Crow. They celebrated their greatest mathematician, a man by the name of Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss, who he lived from 1777 to 1855. He transformed on in the year 1855. In the year 2005, 150 years after his transforming on, they celebrated Gauss by selecting the greatest mathematics works to honor Gauss. As you can see in the page in front of you here, you can see the Gauss year 2005 in red being circled by the cursor. You can also see the work that's listed at the very top of the list, which is the work by Professor Gabriel Oyibo, Grand Unified Theorem, or Gagut. To understand this ranking of Gagut being the number one work to honor Gauss, you must understand the company which Professor Oyibo keeps. If you look at NR19 here at the bottom, you see Sir Michael Atiyah and Daniel Iago Nitzer, field medalist lecturers. Who is Sir Michael Atiyah? Sir Michael Atiyah, if you don't know, let's bring up his page. Sir Michael Atiyah was a British Lebanese mathematician specializing in geometry. He grew up in the Sudan and Egypt, but spent most of his academic life in the United Kingdom at the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge. He was also in the United States at the Institute for Advanced Study. He was the president of the Royal Society, founding director of the Isaac Newton Institute, also the master of Trinity College, a very prestigious chair at Cambridge University. He's also connected to another famous European mathematician in the European system by the name of Sir Professor Isaac Newton. Just let the page load. It's going to load in a second. Sir Isaac Newton, as you can see here, was an English mathematician, physicist, astronomer, theologian, and author, described in his own day as what's called a natural philosopher, who is widely recognized as one of the most influential scientists of all time and a key figure in the scientific revolution. His work, Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, was published in 1687, which laid the foundations of classical mechanics. Newton also made several seminal contributions to optics. He also shares credit with a German by the name of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz for the development of infinitesimal calculus. So what's important to understand here is Newton, who is knighted, Sir Isaac Newton, Sir Professor Isaac Newton, he is considered to be one of the greatest mathematicians in the European system. He's one of the top three, along with Gauss, Newton, and another mathematician we should be discussing later by the name of Euler. They make up the top three European mathematicians. Atiyah, who we were just looking at before, is a successor to Newton at Cambridge. So what's important to understand is Atiyah being a successor to Newton means that that's one of the reasons why his work could have been the number one work to honor Gauss. Although Gauss is considered to be the superior mathematician, Gauss had a lot of respect for Newton. The whole basis of calculus, differential, and some aspects of integral calculus all emanate from Newton. So it's important to understand that basis. The other thing that's important is if you look at the thing that follows the names, Fields Medalist Lectures. What is the Fields Medal, you ask? Well, let's take a look. Just give it a second as it loads. The Fields Medal, as you can see here in front of you, is a prize awarded to 2, 3, or 4 mathematicians under 40 years of age at the International Congress of the International Mathematical Union, a meeting that takes place every 4 years. The last awarding was last year in 2018. The Fields Medal is regarded as one of the highest honors a mathematician can receive, and it has been described as the mathematician's Nobel Prize. That's what the Fields Medal is in the Jim Crow system. So what's important to understand is Atiyah, just so you can see. I will scroll down so you can see the list of the winners. Just give it a second. If you see here on your front of your screen, you'll see Michael Atiyah, Sir Professor Michael Atiyah, had won the award in the year 1966. So he won this award about 53 years ago. So what's important to understand is he has won this prize, which has been described as being the mathematician's Nobel Prize. If you also keep in mind on the work that Week 19 suggests and presents here, it Fields Medalist, as in plural, lectures, which means it includes not just Atiyah, but the other Field medalists. Up until this year of 2005 of this celebration, that including Atiyah, there were 44 Nobel Prize award equivalents or Field medalists. So that work incorporates all of them. Any one of those points I mentioned could have made that work the #1 work to honor Gauss. Atiyah being a successor to Newton, who was very well respected by Gauss. The fact that he has won an award which is equivalent to Nobel Prize for mathematics, which is the Fields Medal. And the work contains all of the Field medalists up until that point. Any one of those points could have made him the #1 work to honor Gauss. All 3 of those points could have made him the #1 work to honor Gauss. Göttingen, however, ranked the work of Sir Professor Michael Atiyah to be inferior to Gagut. Not just that, the work of all 44 Nobel Prize award equivalents to be inferior to Gagut. They are saying to you all very clearly, without any minching of words here, that Gagut is worth more than 44 Nobel Prizes when they have listed Gagut as the #1 work to honor Gauss and have placed Atiyah and the other 4 Nobel Prize award equivalents at Week 19, 7 places below. So you have to understand again the issue I said before about you are the company that you keep. By them ranking this work of Atiyah and the Field medalists at Week 19, 7 places below Gagut, they are telling you that Gagut is worth more than 44 Nobel Prizes. So that's something we must say, praise God. Now, if we take a look at Week 23, you'll see the name, the second name is the most important, Anatoly Tifomenko. Who is he, you ask? Well, let's take a look. This page is loading, just give it a second. Anatoly Timovich Fomenko, born in March 13th, 1945 in Stalino, Russia, or USSR, is a Soviet and Russian mathematician. He's also a professor at Moscow State University and a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences. You have to understand, he comes from a very high level in the university system, something equivalent to our Harvard and MIT here in America, the highest level of the Ivy League, or in England like the Oxford, Cambridge. He comes from that system in Russia. It's also the understanding he's a current day mathematician, but more importantly, he's a successor to another famous European mathematician who I'm going to bring up right now. Just give it a second. On your screen you should be able to see the name Leonhard Euler, Professor Leonhard Euler. Who's he, you ask? Well, let's go over it. Professor Euler, born in 1707, transforming on in 1783, was a Swiss mathematician, physicist, astronomer, geographer, logician, and engineer who made important and influential discoveries in many branches of mathematics, such as infinitesimal calculus and graph theory, while also making pioneering contributions to several branches such as topology and analytic number theory. He also introduced much of the modern mathematical terminology notation, particularly for mathematical analysis, such as the notion of a mathematical function. He is also known for his work in mechanics, fluid dynamics, optics, astronomy, and music theory. Now this is the part that's most important for you all to digest. Euler was one of the most eminent mathematicians of the 18th century and is held to be one of the greatest in history. He is also widely considered to be the most prolific mathematician of all time. His collected works fill 92 volumes, more than anybody in the field. He spent most of his adult academic life in St. Petersburg, Russia. So you have to understand something here. We just went over Fomenko as a current-day Russian mathematician, and he is a successor in reality to Professor Leonard Euler. So what's important to understand here is Euler, like Newton, was held in very high regard and respected by Gauss. And as you just saw here, Euler is recognized as one of the most eminent mathematicians of the 18th century. So what has to be understood here is that Fomenko, being a successor to Euler, he could have easily been the #1 work to honor Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss, because Gauss had a lot of respect for Euler. Göttingen ranked the work of Fomenko to be inferior to Gagut, placing it 3 places below where Gagut was listed. That's important to also understand. Again, you are the company that you keep. We go to NR24. We see the name David Hilbert, Knowledge and Mathematical Thinking. Who is Professor Hilbert, you ask? Let's take a look. Just give it a second. Professor David Hilbert, who you see on your screen here, born in 1862, transforming on in 1943, was a German mathematician and one of the most influential and universal mathematicians of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Now what's important to understand here is if you look at his picture on the right, you go scrolling down below, you'll see the institutions he associated with. He's associated with Göttingen University. And if you see the page, you will see it very clearly. It's highlighted and it's up on your screen right now. In addition to that, if you scroll down further, you will see a very long list of doctoral students, people who got their PhDs in mathematics under Hilbert. Now you have to understand, mathematics is already a subject that is very difficult for most people to understand because it requires a lot of intelligence to understand the subject. And even when you get so far in mathematics, like getting a PhD in mathematics after years of study, it's not always likely you become a star in the field of mathematics. So what you have to understand here is Hilbert has the distinction of overseeing 69 PhDs in mathematics. As you can see, the names here on your right, they're all listed here. What's also important to understand about them, as you can see, they're all hyperlinked, which means they have their own Wikipedia page. 69 PhDs in mathematics is an untold record in terms of most mathematicians are lucky to get maybe 2, 3, or 4 students that get PhDs under them. And most of the time they don't get, most of the people that get PhDs under them don't become stars in the field of mathematics. In the case of this particular Gagut discovery, of Hilbert, Hilbert was able to oversee 69 PhDs in mathematics. And all of them became stars in the field of mathematics. So what's important to understand here is that God has gotten us to understand the following here. Hilbert, who comes from Göttingen University, who is the one celebrating Gauss, they have selected the names and people who they're going to honor to recognize Gauss. Hilbert, coming from Göttingen, could have easily been the #1 work and the easiest choice for Göttingen to make, since not only was he a successor to Gauss as the head of the mathematics department at Göttingen, he's also considered to be the last of the great mathematicians and has overseen 69 PhDs in mathematics of stars in the field of mathematics. Any one of those points could have made him the number one work to honor Gauss. All three of those points could make him not the number one choice to honor Gauss. However, Göttingen very painfully had to rank the work of Hilbert inferior to Gagut, 2 places below. That's their own son that comes from Göttingen, a successor to Gauss. They rank that person inferior to Gagut. So now that you see the runners-up of who could have been the number one work to honor Gauss, why did Gagut, the work of a black man, Professor Gabriel Oyibo, win out over the others? First of all, you see me saying number 1, but you see the number 26. Let us break down why that's important to understand why that position is number 1. What you're going to see in front of you is a Deutschmark of Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss. It's important to understand, especially for us as black people, how the German people have recognized a legend in their field of mathematics from their country, and how he was honored. Gauss was not a politician. He never sought office. He's a simple mathematician. He's considered to be the greatest European mathematician prior to Gagut. But the important thing to understand here is he is put on the Deutschmark as a means of the German people showing respect and recognition of a blessing that came from them and their people, and how they do not treat it as if it was nothing. You see Gauss's face on this 10 Deutschmark because they understood what he contributed and how he propelled the image of Germany to the world. More importantly, if you look to the left of his face on the Deutschmark, you'll see this graph or curve here. This is a curve from one branch of mathematics which is called statistics. The specific curve that you see here is what's known as a Gaussian distribution curve or a bell curve. It deals with when you have a standard deviation from a norm or mean. You see where the data, when you're analyzing or listing data, how much something deviates from its norm. That is the type of curve that deals with it. This curve that you see here. What's important to know here is that usually in a curve like this, the median point or the middle point always corresponds to the highest point in the curve. So for the Gauss year 2005 celebration, which we're just looking at, remember, they celebrated the 150th anniversary of Gauss by selecting the greatest mathematics works throughout the year. There are 52 weeks that make up a year. So the data set or the number of works they selected to honor Gauss are 52. If you take 52 and you divide that by 2 in order to get the median or the middle point, 52 divided by 2 is 26. So what this means is that the week number 26 will correspond to the highest point on the curve, which is where Gagut was placed. If you remember, if you go back to the list, Gagut was listed at week 26, which means Gagut is the number 1 work at the very top of the list, which can't be superseded by any other work because it's the number 1 work. The only entity that can supersede Gagut and Professor Oyibo is the Almighty God. That's what the Germans recognized. So what you have to now understand is, now that you understand the position of where Gagut was placed in terms of being number 1, why was Gagut selected to be the number 1 work? Well, then you have to understand the definitions that come through Gagut. This comes to an understanding of the nature of proof. In mathematics, we don't just tell you something and tell you to believe it. We prove everything that we say here. Gagut, an acronym standing for God, ALMIGHTY'S Grand Unified Theorem. What is important to understand about that is the following. Gagut has defined the subject of mathematics to be the study of theorems. A theorem, just to give you a quick recap of what that means, a theorem is an infallible truth, like 2 + 1 = 3. There's no amount of, it doesn't matter where you are in space, whether you're here in America or in a Gagutian continent or on Mars or in another galaxy or another part of the universe. 2 plus 1 will always equal 3. It's infallible, can't change. It does not matter of belief. It's not a matter if you're in so-called a different religion or a different belief set where you say, I can't believe that or I'm not going to go along with that. 2 plus 1 equals 3. That's what makes it a theorem. It's infallible truth. Mathematics is the study of infallible truth. That's what Gagut has defined the subject of mathematics to be. In addition, Gagut, God Almighty's Grand Unified Theorem. All the words that make up that acronym are important. But the last two for this proof are the most important, which is unified and theorem. Unified and theorem means Gagut contains all theorems. We are now going to take the two statements we have just used to now formulate the proof of why Gagut was selected to be the number one work. Since Gagut has defined mathematics to be the study of theorems or infallible truth, and since Gagut contains all theorems from the words unified theorem or all infallible truth, one can now infallibly deduce and prove that Gagut contains all mathematics. We say praise God to that, because that is the victory right there. When Göttingen selected the work of Professor Oyibo to be the number one work, it wasn't because they were feeling generous or trying to do something good for a black person just on the face of it. It's because they recognized that a black man, Professor Oyibo, was blessed with the totality of mathematics. As I went over with the graph on the Deutschmark that you just saw just a couple minutes ago, Gagut was put at the very top of the curve for that very reason. When you have the work that contains all mathematics, you can't go beyond that. So what the Germans recognized is the works of Professor Sir Michael Atiyah and all the field medalists at week 19. They're all reproducible from Gagut. The work of Professor Fomenko at week 23 is reproducible from Gagut. The work of Professor Hilbert at week 24 is all reproducible from Gagut, Professor Oyibo's work. Also the works of Newton are all reproduced from Gagut. The works of Euler are reproducible from Gagut. The works of Riemann, who we're going to get into later, are reproducible from Gagut. The works of even Gauss himself, whom the celebration was dedicated towards, is all reproducible from Gagut. That is what compelled the Germans to recognize the work of a black man as the number one work to honor Professor Carl Friedrich Gauss. In doing so, they have now taken that baton of excellence from Gauss, who before Gagut was considered to be the greatest European mathematician. Now that baton has been handed over officially to Professor Oyibo as the greatest mathematician of all time that can never be surpassed. Past, present, and future infallibly. This is what this surrender means for us as black people. Before Gagut, there's no opportunity or chance that a black person will even be in the celebration. As you can see from the names there, if you ignore just for a second Professor Oyibo's name, you can see all the names here are non-blacks, Europeans or those type. Gagut not only forced the Germans to put black people on the celebration, but at the very top, because it contains all mathematics. So this is a surrender you have to recognize that now puts the black race in the position of leadership again. The surrender from Göttingen is powerful on its own. It's very impactful just by itself. But it's complemented by another surrender, which now brings us to the east of Europe. Now this brings us to Asia. The document that you see in front of you is a research paper called Gauge Conditions for an Abelian Chern-Simons System Consistent with Equations of Motion. You will see several names there, but there's one name in particular which is very important. That name is this name here, Krishnendu Dasgupta. Let's take a look at who he is. But first, it's important to understand several things about where he comes from. As you can see, the paper is from the Department of Physics in Jamia Millia Islamia. That is a top 19 university school in India. As you can see from the New Delhi 110025 there below. What's important to understand is Jamia Millia Islamia was funded by the King of Saudi Arabia. It is also, as you can tell from the last word there, Islamia, a very heavily Islamic school, or Islamic influence school. So what's important to understand here is that Professor Krishnendu Dasgupta is a mathematical physicist, an expert in mathematical physics. He comes from this school of Jamia Millia Islamia. It's important to understand that Indians have won a great deal of Nobel Prizes in physics. So it's important to understand that background about Dasgupta. Unfortunately, Dasgupta also has another background which needs to be brought to our attention, which is the fact that he is part of what's called a caste system. Before Gagut, the caste system was a very viciously fraudulent system that propagated the so-called lighter-skinned Indians as being the so-called top of the system. When you got into darker shades of color, you were supposedly in the lower levels. When you got to the actual black people in India, or the Indians in India, they were referred to as Dalit, or untouchables, at the very bottom. This is the background Dasgupta came from. In addition, Dasgupta comes from the Indian people who, because they're slightly tolerated better than black people in the Jim Crow system, it has gotten many Indians to think of themselves, before Gagut, of course, to be better than a black person, where even if a black person's of a lighter skin color than an Indian, the Indian will still think of themselves as better because of that what appears to be better treatment. So Dasgupta, coming from this background, had once heard hearing about Professor Oyibo, a black man, a Gagutian from Africa, or Gagutia. When he heard that Professor Oyibo was blessed with the solution to all problems through Gij, comma j equals 0, he was instantly compelled to write our university a letter. And the letter that you will see in front of you is what he wrote to us. Just give it a second as it loads. Okay, and scroll down to the letter. Okay, let me get, it went a little too far there, just a second. Okay, from Krishnendu Dasgupta on Wednesday, July 25th, 2007 at 9:24 a.m. to Professor Oyibo. The subject title is God's Mission and Dasgupta. Why is this important? God's mission in Dasgupta is in effect Dasgupta testifying and swearing upon what he's going to articulate, which I'm going to read to you right now. He's taking an oath, in effect. And the rest of the letter reads as follows. Dear Oyibo, good day. I heard that you have been successful in finding the unified field theory. Congratulations. You are more close to God than any of us. You are more close to God than any of us. I was also working upon this theory. Since my theory was different, God was different to me. Please write to me, as I would like to know where I was wrong. Thanking you, yours, Krishnendu Dasgupta. People, you have just witnessed the complete destruction of the caste system forever. That is another victory that you must understand. You see, the caste system is no different than what Jim Crow does here in black people when they so-called put you at the bottom because of skin color. That now has been destroyed because when Dasgupta recognized a Gagutian, a black man, Professor Oyibo, as being more close to God than any of us, it completely destroys the whole fraud of black people being at the bottom. You can't be a member of a group that has been closer to God or has been, due to God blessing Professor Oyibo with the totality of all intelligence, being more close to God, and yet still be supposed to be at the bottom. And you also have to understand as black people, because we share the same genes as Professor Oyibo, that makes the black race also more close to God than any other race. Dasgupta had no choice but to declare this because of the infallibility of Gagut. This is why we say, praise God. The other thing that you also must understand about Dasgupta's statement is that, as I said earlier, Dasgupta comes from a top 19 school called Jamia Millia Islamia. It's a school funded by the King of Saudi Arabia, and it's very heavily Islamic influenced. A countryman of Dasgupta back in the late 80s, in 1988, a man by the name of Salman Rushdie, an Indian author there, had written a work called The Satanic Verses. Although it was in a fictional account, it was an account that he declared about Muhammad. This account was considered to be such an insult to Islam and so offensive to them. They actually, in 1989, the Ayatollah of Iran, in that year of 1989, had actually called upon all the followers of Islam to assassinate Rushdie in India for that work. Rushdie had to be taken out of India and brought into the UK to prevent him being assassinated by the followers of Islam. So you have to understand, this happened in 1989, about 30 years ago. Dasgupta in 2007 declared a black man as being more close to God than any of us, in the same very heavily Islamic-controlled area that Rushdie was from, or was in India. They have to understand, if Rushdie could be assassinated for challenging the position of Muhammad in the fictional work, Dasgupta has just declared a black man as being more close to God than any of us, which means if you understand Islam, the most prominent figure, or revered figure, or venerated figure isn't even Allah, but Muhammad. So you have to understand, when Dasgupta declared Professor Oyibo as being more close to God than any of us, he didn't say Professor Oyibo's a prophet like Muhammad, or is approaching Muhammad. He said that Professor Oyibo is more close to God than any of us, which means Professor Oyibo supersedes Muhammad. If Dasgupta was articulating something that the Islamic people could challenge, there would have been a fatwa declared on Dasgupta back in 2007. However, because Dasgupta presented an infallible truth, as of this date of September 1st, 2019, Dasgupta is alive and well. No fatwa has been declared on him because he articulated an infallible truth that no one can challenge. It's important to understand Dasgupta had no fear articulating the truth, and he's not technically a Gagutian. So black people can't be afraid of articulating and recognizing the infallible truth of Professor Oyibo being more close to God than any of us due to the blessing of Gagut, G-I-J, J equals 0, and being blessed of eta sub infinity intelligence. The situation is also analogous to what happened in Christianity, where the most revered or venerated character in Christianity isn't even God, but Jesus Christ. When Professor Dasgupta declared Professor Oyibo as being more close to God than any of us, he was not saying Professor Oyibo is a Messiah like Jesus or approaching Jesus. He said Professor Oyibo is more close to God than any of us. That means Professor Oyibo supersedes Jesus Christ. For most people, that's a statement that will turn you off right away, thinking the brother's mad. How in the world could he possibly say a black man supersedes Jesus Christ? Or for those who are following Islam, they'll say, how could a black man supersede Muhammad? The infallible proof of that is basic and very simple for you to understand. And it all boils down to just one thing. God bless Professor Oyibo with the formula G-I-J, J equals 0, which contains all infallible truths, past, present, and future, infallibly. When I was going over Göttingen and Gauss year celebration, one of the things I can also explain to you about the past, present, and future is every past mathematical work is embedded inside Gagut. Every current day mathematical work of this date of September 1st, 2019 is embedded in Gagut. And every future mathematical work is also embedded inside of Gagut. If you fast forward to the year 2071 AD, if someone claims to come up with something new in mathematics, it's already contained within Gagut. You can fast forward to the year 3070 AD. Someone claims to come up with something new in Gagut. Something new in mathematics. It's already contained within Gagut. You can go as far to the future as the year 10 billion AD. Even as far as that would appear to people. Even then, if someone tries to claim to come up with something new in mathematics, it is already still contained within Gagut. So what's important to understand about that is God blessed Professor Oyibo with the formula that contains all infallible truth. I challenge any one of you listening to the broadcast to show me where in the Bible, Old or New Testament, or in the Quran, where it specified Jesus or Muhammad having any formula, G-I-J, J equals 0, which contained all infallible truth, or even where it specified what theorem or mathematical rigorous proof is attributed to Jesus or to Muhammad in terms of proving theorems mathematically in the Bible or in the Quran. That is the infallible proof of why Professor Oyibo is more close to God than any of us. The formula, G-I-J, J equals 0. God bless Professor Oyibo with that formula, which contains the totality and ultimate knowledge. And that's what makes Professor Oyibo grow closer to God than any of us, superseding both Muhammad and Jesus Christ. Das Gupta recognized that, and that's why he proudly declared that in this letter you see in front of you. You have to understand, like Göttingen, this is another surrender by Asia this time. Their countrymen, or next door to them, China, also in the People's Daily, had actually written an article praising the victory that God had blessed Professor Oyibo by winning the greatest academic prize in history, the African International Prize for Science Technology Award. So again, you have a surrender from Europe, particularly Germany represented Europe, and then you have this surrender by India representing Asia. So now we're going to come closer to home, which is right here in America. That brings us to this document we're going to bring up on your screens now. Gagut has been around since 1990. Since 1990 up until this date, it's been around for 29 years. But when Gagut first came on the scene, it forced Jim Crow to recognize the reality of the black people's intelligence. At first, Jim Crow had to recognize Professor Oyibo was blessed with eta sub infinity intelligence, which is the level of intelligence for Professor Oyibo, and the n of infinity. But you have to understand, if you have a race that has a member of that race having the totality of all intelligence, how then can you then be labeled the so-called 3/5 or so-called least intelligent race, as Jim Crow has fraudulently done on black people for the last 2,500 years? That's a very serious problem. That was rectified by this research paper that you see in front of you. The Nuclear DNA Diversity in Worldwide Distributed Human Populations in the Gene Journal, in the National Journal of Genes and Genomes, it took the Gagut formula into the labs of eta sub n to determine the reality of the black people's intelligence. So, if you look at the names here under the title, if it's not clear from you just looking at it, I'll break it down for you. None of these people are black people. They're all non-blacks. The best example of that is the name I'm circling here, which is Kenneth K. Kidd. Kenneth K. Kidd's initials, K, K, and K, should automatically tell you who is conducting this particular research. So what's important to understand, this is Jim Crow conducting it. This is not a bunch of black people in the so-called HBCUs conducting this research. And if you want to see what Professor Kenneth K. Kidd is associated with, the superscript B corresponds to here, to Yale University, School of Medicine, Department of Genetics, 333 Cedar Street, New Haven, Connecticut, 06510. That's why it's the Gagut Yale study. They're the one leading this research. And if you look at the other university names, you see a university in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. You see universities in Rome, Italy. You also see universities like Pennsylvania State University and Louisiana State University. None of those are historical black colleges. These are all Jim Crow schools. The other thing that's important to understand is this research was conducted in 1997. Gagut had actually officially ordered the president at the time, President Bill Clinton, to conduct this research because Like I said, you can't have Professor Oyibo being blessed with the totality of all intelligence, and yet the black people still being labeled the so-called least intelligent race, as Jim Crow has fraudulently done for the last 2,500 years. So this now took Gagut, the formula, eta sub n, into the labs to determine the reality of the black people's intelligence. That now brings us to this abstract, which we're seeing right now. If you look at the abstract, if you look at the fourth line of the abstract, this brings us to the first part that we need to understand. In this way, the European bias in the nuclear polymorphism ascertainment has been avoided. Okay, so what does that mean? There are a lot of words there, but let's break it down. Let's start with European bias. What does European bias mean? European bias means, or is equivalent with, Jim Crow, or the 3/5. So you have to understand that had to be removed from the experiment in order to get the correct results. That's what that line is telling you there. The European bias is the 3/5 labeling that they put on black people, or the Jim Crow factor. That had to be removed right out of the way in order for them to get the correct results. If that had been there, there would have been a fraudulent result. But that has been removed. Now, it brings us now to achieve what the result that they get, which is, now we go to line 6. It starts here. 15 polymorphisms were shared among most of the populations compared, whereas 13 sites are found to be endemic to Africans and 4 to non-Africans. Let's break down what this means. Polymorphisms, as defined by Gagut, is a mapping of several points in space onto just one point in space. It's also represented by the n, which is the level of intelligence in the eta sub n formula. As you know, animals, lower level animals like perhaps a chimpanzee, a dog, or a turtle, or a squirrel, or a bird, they have polymorphisms, but they have a very low level polymorphism count. When you get to the primates, or the things like a gorilla or ape or chimpanzee, they have higher than those animals, but still not higher than a human being. Humans have a base number of 15 polymorphisms, or an n of 15 as a base. But it is found out in this research there are 13 sites that are found to be endemic to Africans, which means there are an additional 13 compared to that 15 original. So 15 plus 13 is 28. That corresponds to an n of 28 from the eta sub n formula. So the level there for black people, as they declare in this research, is 28 polymorphisms, or an n of 28. Jim Crow for themselves, which non-blacks are whites, Asians, Jewish, and Arab peoples, they counted a 4 that are endemic to themselves. So 15 plus 4 is 19. The ratio is then now of 28 to the black people to 19 for the non-black people, or 28 over 19. But you have to realize Jim Crow, even in this research, they underestimate the black people's results. So when they declared 28 for the black people, it is more likely to be higher than that. So when you recognize that it's higher, we now change that to the term 28 plus. On the contrary, they do the opposite for themselves. They always overestimate themselves. So when they said 19, it's likely less than that, so it's going to be 19 minus. So the new fraction we have is 28 plus over 19 minus. 28 plus means we go to the next whole number that's above 28, but for the sake of trying to simplify the fraction, we're going to try to go to a number that's divisible or it can be broken down. In other words, a whole number that's not prime. If you go to from 28 to 29, 29 is a prime number, so that doesn't help. But if we go to the next number above that, that is 30. That's a number that's divisible by several numbers. So we're going to take 28 plus and go to 30. In the case of 19 minus, we're going to go to the next whole number below that that's divisible. That we can use 18. So the new fraction is approximate, not equal, but approximate in terms of 28 plus over 19 minus is approximately 30 over 18. 30 over 18 can be broken down because 30 and 18 share a common factor of 6. That's the greatest common factor between them. 30 divided by 6 is 5. So your new numerator becomes 5. 18 divided by 6 is 3. Your new denominator or bottom number becomes 3. So 30 over 18 now can be rewritten as 5 over 3. 5 over 3 is an inverse or a reciprocal to the 3/5 fraud. The official position of the United States government is the black race has a 5/3 of ratio of 28 to 19, but approximately 5 to 3 intelligence for the black people, or 5 over 3. That is now revealing the black race as being the most intelligent race. And that is, again, a victory that's infallible. And we must say, praise God. It's mathematical, it's scientific, and it's official. After 2,500 years of fraud regarding the intelligence of the black people, God has now ordained and blessed the black race with being with the totality of all intelligence. That now means we, our black people, now must be demonstrating the reality of us being the most intelligent. Now that brings me to the next point which I want to share with you. If you just hold for a second, please hold. If you take a look in front of you, you'll see the telephone number 631-242-3069. You've now been ordered to call us now so that you can understand your position as now being members of the race who are the most intelligent, richest, and most invincible race. You have just been demonstrated the Gagut geometry, Gagutical geometry, of how God has blessed you as a race of being the most intelligent and richest, as well as the most invincible race. Now you've been called upon now to call us here at 631-242-3069, so you can recognize your reality of being the most intelligent, richest, and most invincible race. It's a God order which is infallible. And what's also important to understand in light of that is that right now the best gift for Gagutians or black people who are celebrating their birthday is realizing that this whole presentation that has been given to you is recognizing the rebirth of the black people. Gone is the 3/5 fraud. Gone is the image of black people so-called being the least intelligent. You have now been reborn from 3/5 to 5/3. We must say praise God for that. But it now demands you, as those listening to this, now call in at 631-242-3069. So you can now celebrate your rebirth, and that's done in a very simple parallel. When the Germans at Göttingen celebrated Gagut as the #1 work to honor Gauss, they have in effect immortalized Gauss in that celebration of Gagut. Gauss is forever immortalized because of them selecting Gagut as the #1 work to honor Gauss. Celebrating Gagut is what immortalized Gauss. If you can substitute, we praise God for that. But if you substitute, for example, what we call Gagutians who are having their birthday, The best gift you can give them on their birthday is them being immortalized. The way you can immortalize a Gagutian on their birthday is by celebrating Gagut. When you celebrate Gagut, you are immortalizing that Gagutian's birthday. So what this means is, we're talking about the people who know the Gagutian's birthday, not the Gagutian celebrating the birthday, but the people who are celebrating a particular Gagutian's birthday. They can now come together, call this number, in calling this number and in celebrating Gagut, which they can do through making contributions or donations on the Gagut PayPal, which if you call this number you can make a donation. You can also make a donation on the description link when we put the video up. There's going to be a PayPal link there. You are celebrating Gagut. Celebrating Gagut in the name of that Gagutian. Immortalize that Gagutian. Like the Göttingen celebration of Gagut. Celebrating Gagut immortalized Gauss. It publicizing Gagut. That is the equivalent towards putting the Gagutian's name, or the celebrating the Gagutian's birthday, or the name of that Gagutian, in the donating to Gagut. Propagating Gagut to the world. This is what we are now going to be doing in our form of our Gagut media. And the media contribution from Göttingen was their celebrating Gagut. And in doing that, they honored Gagut, they immortalized Gauss. Just like when you celebrate the Gagutians, when you celebrate Gagut on behalf of that Gagutian, you are honoring and immortalizing that Gagutian's name once and for all. You can donate to the prize award to honor that Gagutian. You can donate to the Gagut briefings as well as to the Gagut book drive, and to any of the Gagut donations you can give this moment. They all will be in place of honoring Gagut, and in honoring Gagut you are also honoring the Gagutian because you're immortalizing him. You can also donate to the Gagut Industrial Park. Like the Jewish people created an industrial park with relativity, they invested funds in creating what's called IAS, Institute for Advanced Science Study, and they did that in 1930 in the middle of a depression, a Great Depression. They did that, they were able to raise the funds that were able to create IAS, and then later broke an even bigger industrial complex, or the industrial, a Manufacturing Industry and University, through the Manhattan Project. That's how they were able to create an industrial park that gave them the best jobs. So the best jobs for our people can only be gotten through calling this number, 631-242-3069, to invest in the best jobs within the Gagut Industrial Park for all black people and for the whole humanity. So it's donating to oneself. That's what must be in everyone's minds. It's important that everyone digest this message, and as we go into the 6 o'clock hour, we're going to be resuming again at 7:30. So I want you to understand, you can call this number to honor or to celebrate Gagut on behalf of the Gagutian's birthday, and by celebrating Gagut, you are immortalizing the Gagutian whose birthday is being celebrated. You can call us now at 631-242-3069. So, praise God, and everyone take a good break, and we'll be back shortly. You can call us at 631-242-3069 so you can get the greatest gift for any Gagutian, which is celebrating Gagut. Celebrating Gagut provides that Gagutian to be immortalized. So like I said, the greatest gift for any Gagutian who's having their birthday today is to have them celebrate Gagut. Celebrating Gagut will immortalize the black person or Gagutian whose birthday is being celebrated. This is the same way that like the Göttingen celebrated Gagut, they immortalized Gauss. So when you are celebrating Gagut on behalf of the Gagutian's birthday, that Gagutian who's having that birthday will be immortalized. That's the point that needs to be digested. Göttingen must understand, the point is very clear because they recognize Gagut as the greatest mathematics work. And by them doing that and celebrating Gagut, they have immortalized Gauss. So the Gagutians, they want something for their birthday. The best gift you can give them is by celebrating Gagut. When you celebrate Gagut, the God order that has declared the black race as being the most intelligent, richest, and most invincible race, you are now immortalizing that Gagutian who is celebrating a Gagut birthday. That is the parallel that must be digested. Like I said before, Göttingen celebrated Gagut, and in terms of by them celebrating Gagut, they have immortalized Gauss, whose the celebration was dedicated for, and the same parallel is there again to be hammered with the Gagut birthday. When you have a Gagutian celebrating a birthday, the best gift you can give them is to celebrate Gagut. And in celebrating Gagut, you will be, in fact, blessing that Gagutian with the greatest gift of all, which is immortalizing them. You do that, you call this number, you can immortalize that Gagutian by donating to the Gagut Alphabet Institute of Technology. You can do that through donating to the Gagut briefings. You can donate to the Gagut courses. You can donate to the Gagut book drive. You can do that to the Gagut Industrial Park. Any way you choose to contribute or to celebrate Gagut, you are immortalizing that Gagutian's birthday for whom you're doing it towards. Again, the parallel is when Göttingen celebrated Gagut on the Gauss Year 2005 celebration, they actually immortalized Gauss. Just like when you celebrating Gagut on behalf of a Gagutian having their birthday, you are giving that Gagutian the best gift of all, which is having that Gagutian immortalized. So call us at 631-242-3069 so you can immortalize or be immortalized. The Gagutian that's celebrating their birthday can be immortalized at this moment, right now. Again, Göttingen immortalized Gauss when they celebrated Gagut. By celebrating Gagut, they immortalized Gauss. Just like you, who are celebrating a Gagutian's birthday, if you celebrate Gagut, you are immortalizing that Gagutian's birthday and Gagutian who is celebrating that birthday. So call us at 631-242-3069. If you have any questions, also, please call us at 631-242-3069. We'll take a break. We're going to be back at 7:30.